This is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money radio show. Just got off the air with John Hupalo. He's our college admissions expert. He comes on once a month. And I got to tell you, I went into that interview with him about all the changes that are happening with college financial aid, literally the tsunami of debt that's about to come back alive again. The student loan debt repayment process has started again. And all the implications that go along with it, all the things that could go wrong, probably will go wrong because this is so poorly handled, and what all that means. So if you are a student loan borrower, you need to be listening to this, and you need to be going to mycollegecorner.com because there's a lot of changes going along. If you have a student in college, you need to be doing, or a student in high school, got to start figuring out how this works. If you got any question for me, go to prudentmoney.com, info@prudentmoney.com, and John's website is mycollegecorner.com. Keep the faith.
Pastor Begg of Truth for Life, heard daily and weekends on Bible School Radio, 91.3 KDKR, Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC Commerce.
Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, the U.S. Department of Education is about to fundamentally change how eligibility for college financial aid is calculated. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money radio show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, the government is changing things again, and this time it is how we calculate financial aid. Today, college expert John Hupalo is here to weigh in. Hey, John, how's it going?
Bob, I'm doing great. Good afternoon. Nice to be with you.
You know, you sound very calm for all the information we got to cover today. I was just going through all the changes. It's unbelievable how much we've got to cover today. Some big changes, and we'll start with that. This really changes the way financial aid is calculated. And the first question I've got, and incidentally, you put this out on Twitter the other day, and we actually put it on our site as well. But is this going to be affecting this next enrollment of college students?
Yeah, Bob, I got to tell you, when you and I have these conversations, every once in a while I shake my head and I say, I remember the George Costanza's father on one of my favorite shows, Seinfeld, used to say, "Serenity now," when things were just going absolutely crazy. And so I kind of smile and I say, "Serenity now," because literally the Department of Education is going to change the interactions it has with every single student who borrowed money from the student loan program. We'll talk about that. And they're also going to change the process that every student who wants financial aid in academic year 24-25, so 1 year from right now when they all start up again. So that means every freshman, sophomore, and junior, all of the high school kids who are now applying, and all their parents are in a complete state of confusion. And you know this is unintentional because if the government tried to actually plan to do something like this, there's no way they could pull it off. So this is unbelievable. It's like a tsunami. And this whole thing that we're going to talk about this new way to calculate financial aid, the only reason you're not reading a lot about it in the paper right now is because of the student loan restart and the student loan forgiveness, which is still up for air. But as soon as the 1st of October comes and that becomes yesterday's news, this is going to hit like a ton of bricks.
Well, and we'll talk a little bit about this, hopefully we'll get to it, but there is every other article on a yahoo.com or whatever site is the government's doing this now to cancel out your student loan debt. I mean, if I was a college student or just got out of college, and the confusion of what's going on is just unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. And again, this is all coming to a head probably, literally, 5 or 6 years worth of all kinds of discussion by the politicians in Washington about what they were going to do to fix the student loan program. And so one of the things that they said in 2020 was we're going to fix the whole financial aid process by simplifying that form, that FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. We're going to start with that. We're going to simplify it and make it much easier for everybody to qualify for financial aid. That sounds like a great idea. But now we see what's happening with the execution of it, and it's just confusion upon confusion upon confusion.
So, of course, we, fill those out for the boys. And number one, I thought it was a pretty smooth and easy process. So I guess this is really not so much about the simplification, so to speak, but just that, hey, let's give out as much financial aid as we can. Is that more like what it seems like it's about?
Well, it started really 4 or 5 or 6 years ago when it was not so easy, and I had a similar experience. My daughter is an independent student, a graduate student, but I walked through the form with her, and the IRS data retrieval tool now works pretty well. So you put in your information, and it kind of populates that form. Well, it wasn't quite like that 6 or 7 years or so ago when they first started using that simplification. So for your listeners, and this is something that I think really scares a lot of people, frankly. It says, trust us. Click this button, and the IRS is going to populate this financial aid form, right? I don't know what your emotional reaction, Bob, was. My daughter's like, Dad, do I really want to do this?
I got to tell you, my reaction to that was, man, I hope this works.
Yeah, right. But you're crossing your fingers and you're saying a prayer, and there are a lot of people who will say, you know what, I don't trust the government, so I don't want to do it. And so this kind of led to this whole thing of saying, well, if we reduce the number of questions on the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA form, well, the good news is that people will be more inclined to fill it out. So they took what was like 130 question form, and now they've reduced it to like well under 100. But in the process of doing that, they also went back and fundamentally changed how that calculation is. So as you said it, you filled out your form, the FAFSA form, and you got back something called an expected family contribution, right? And that came in a fancy report they call the student aid report, but it doesn't matter. But what does matter is one of the fundamental changes that they made, and you're going to feel this yourself next year when you fill out the new form, is that you got basically credit for having both your boys in school, right? So I'm going to make this number up, and I'm going to say, let's just say they said, Bob Brooks, your expected family contribution to pay for college is $10,000, right? And since you have 2 kids in school, that's basically $5,000 each. So each one of those, you have a $5,000 expected family contribution. In the new form, and on our calculator at mycollegecorner.com, the Student Aid Index Calculator, it's an estimator, our new formula follows the federal new formula, and they say, oh, guess what, Bob? That we're taking that out. We're not dividing by 2 anymore. We're just going to keep it in place. And they've made some adjustments along the way behind the scenes that you don't want to know the detail of, but they made some adjustments. They'll say, well, that should help. But the reality is, when we've done some of these preliminary calculations for some families, and those who work with us do these, it's coming out that the student aid index is producing a number that is higher than what the expected family contribution was that you would have gotten for your boys. So I just said a mouthful, but the reality is that what I'm trying to say is they simplified the number of inputs, but they made it more confusing about how they're actually going to allocate aid.
So will this end up eliminating, just to make sure I'm following what you're saying, does this end up eliminating some students who were getting financial aid, or does it potentially expand the population of people who are getting financial aid?
So what's interesting is the dollars, the pot of financial aid dollars available is, let's just say it's pretty fixed, right? So it goes up a little bit every year, but it's pretty fixed. And there's need-based aid, which the government supplies in the form of Pell Grants and other grants, and that pie is growing, and the Congress wants there to be more Pell Grants. And the Pell Grants are for the neediest students. So what this new student aid index does, and now put on your thinking cap to try to get your head around this, you can actually have a negative student aid index. So you can say, you know what, we've done all these calculations, and your student is so needy that when you take the cost of attendance minus the student aid index, they still need more money. It can go down to negative $1,500. But now here's the catch. The school can't give them the extra $1,500, but what the Department of Education said is we want to give the schools an opportunity to understand the neediest students. So if you have a negative $1,500, you're more needy than if it's zero, or if your expected contribution is 100 or 1,000. I said expected contribution. I'm sorry, I should have said student aid index is 1,000 or whatever it might be. So it goes negative. And to where we started, how confusing is all this, right? You do this new calculation, and now I've got a negative number as what I'm expected to my family will pay for college, except that they're not going to give me this extra money. It's really kind of crazy. What it does do, and this is, I think, to exactly your point, and it's the right point, it allows the federal government to better allocate their Pell Grant eligibility based on neediness. So the students that have a negative 1,500 are going to get more Pell Grant money than they would if they had a student aid index number closer to zero or above zero. That's really what this seems to be about.
Okay, so let me walk through this for a second. If say you're my youngest's age, he's a freshman this year.
Yep.
And so he should be taking any aid he was going to get, any scholarships, anything he was going to get should have been taken care of for 23 and 24.
That's correct.
Okay.
This year, his first year. Typically,
correct me if I'm wrong. I should know these. I had gone through it just last year. But if you're applying for the 24-25 school year, then the forms start to become eligible to fill out at the end of this year, right?
That's right.
So the end of this year, then those forms will be the new forms?
That's right. And you'll remember that last year you were able to access that form on October 1st.
Yes.
You might not remember October 1st, but it was really early in October. But it's October 1st, and the Department of Education said we're going to make this available, give families more time, and importantly, give schools more time to allocate their financial aid for early decision candidates and all the rest of them. This year, because they've changed this whole process, the department has said, we're not going to have the form ready on October 1st. It's going to be ready in December. And they still haven't said what day in December. So all the guidance is just tell people that they should go and start to get ready to get the form, but it's not going to be available until December sometime.
Oh, my gosh. What could go wrong?
Well, precisely. And again, we wrote an article to try to start this conversation. I know you put it up, and we encourage people. Thank you for putting it up, because we just want to get the word out there very early that this is changing. There's going to be some confusion around it. The government has not supplied the final form, and they haven't even confirmed that the equation, the formula that we use in our calculator, is the actual one that they are going to use in the final form. They haven't. We've taken all the guidance they've given us, anything that's out there, but they haven't said, well, this is the final form locked down. So we're hoping that will come soon. So we put this article at mycollegecorner.com on the blog just to start to get some information out, and we also linked to the Department of Education site where they've been updating this information on the new student aid index.
You know, have you, I know you've been following this a lot closer than I have for many, many years. Have you ever come across a situation where the government says, we're going to roll this out and give a date, and it ever be on time?
Yeah, now you're really testing my memory, Bob. I cannot recall any time that they've done something that's been on. And by the way, this has already been delayed several times. This was supposed to have been rolled out a year or so ago. And then they came back and said, well, we need more time and, all the rest of it. And so they put the line in the sand for this year. And I'm sure that they wish they put the line in the sand for next year, because they're not ready. They're just not.
So explain this one thing to me. I've never asked you this, but I've always wondered. What is the purpose of making all students fill out the FAFSA?
That's a great question. And there are some high-earning families that say it's a waste of our time and we shouldn't do it. And so from a need-based perspective and the way these formulas work, it is mostly income-driven. The new formula actually takes some more assets into account, but that's a very big nuance. But the answer to your very good question is, why should everybody fill it out? Because every single student in the United States, Bill Gates' kids, are eligible for a federal student loan, right? And you say, well, so what? It's a $5,500 loan for a freshman. But if you use that loan correctly, in my view, responsible borrowing, that really kind of sets the stage for a student. And if they're taking a minimal amount of debt outstanding, it teaches them a lot about how financial responsibility works in the world.
Yes.
And so I think it's important, why not? And you never know, like, what aid you might get. But in order to get any kind of federal aid, any work-study job, a federal student loan, a Pell Grant, any of that, you have to complete this form, right? So that's really important. And again, to make this really important point, if this is for federal aid, some schools, they call them institutional grants, they have a whole separate, they call it the institutional methodology for figuring out how they want to allocate their financial aid dollars. That's a whole different form. We won't go into that, but that's another part of the confusion. And that's basically like the elite private four-year schools are using this supplemental form from the College Board called the CSS Profile, and they really dig into your finances at a whole different level.
So is this process in its current condition to where you could sit a family down and walk them through it? Or is it just, it's not even there yet?
Well, it is from the perspective that there's, I'm going to say, hard guidelines, in fact. So one of the big questions, and some of your listeners may be thinking about this, and the situation is particularly whose information goes on that FAFSA form, right?
So true.
So if you're a married family and you're filing jointly, a husband and wife, it's pretty straightforward. It's not so straightforward if you're divorced. And there are many people in this situation. So it used to be under the EFC calculation that wherever the student was domiciled, so if they were living with the mom or the dad, wherever they were living is the parent who should fill out that form. Now it's completely different. Now they say, well, it's the one who provides the most support to the student. So it might be that the student is living with the mom doesn't have a job, the father is providing all the support for the family, and they're not living together, so his income is the one that's supposed to go on the new form. Now, good luck trying to audit that. That's all I can say, but that's the way it works.
Yeah, well, that actually seems to make sense. But I tell you what, I would, the one job I would not want to have right now has to be in college admissions, because that's where everybody's going to go with their confusion.
Absolutely right, Bob. They are between a rock and a hard place for all of these students who are coming through the process now. And there's not a lot of guidance from the Department of Education about what they should be doing. For instance, how do you allocate all of these dollars out? And we're not even talking about the Supreme Court decision about the affirmative action. So the admissions department is trying to figure out, okay, how do we not discriminate against these kids? And then they've got a whole separate discussion going on with the financial aid office about how are we going to allocate our financial aid dollars to this incoming class without discriminating against them. It's really a very, very difficult time in the schools, no question.
Okay, so if that was not bad enough, okay, and that's got Tsunami written all over it. This next, and I don't know, you and I haven't had a chance to talk, obviously, but this next survey troubles me quite a bit, and I can see where this could be going to the point to where we could have a enormous problem on our hands just because of government's decision making, and that doesn't make any sense. By the way, mycollegecorner.com is John's great website full of so much good free information, and I know that people will be going there if they haven't already to start trying to figure all this out. Here's just the the headline number, John, 62% of student loan borrowers say they will likely boycott repayment. So repayments of student loans has been on hiatus for 3.5 years roughly.
That's right.
And it goes, bills start going out at the end of this month or the beginning?
No, they for September 1 for the first payment, October 1.
Okay, for October 1.
Yep.
So to add to this problem of 62% of student loan borrowers who obviously do not understand the gravity of going into default at some point, so they're going to boycott the repayment, and that goes into the program that the government has put into place for this whole next year. Hey, if you don't have the money, don't pay it. No big deal. We're not gonna ding your credit. We're not gonna put you in collections. And I can just see this playing out, John. I can see people, student loan borrower, go, "Hey, I showed them I'm not going to pay this, and it's no big deal." And then they get their heads chopped off next October.
Oh, absolutely, Bob. You know, there's this discussion in the market now that there's going to be a student loan strike. You know, they're not going to pay their bills. And the reason I have this sort of sarcastic sound in my voice is that we saw this in 2011. Remember the Occupy Wall Street? There was a student loan boycott.
Good point.
It's nonsense. It's nonsense. If this weren't a Christian radio station and I'd say something else. But I'm telling you, this is just kind of crazy. So here's why. You hit the nail on the head. This is a really bad idea. And you know, Mark Kantrowitz is one of the smart guys. You hear him around all the time. Talking about, quoted in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times all the time. He wrote an article not too long ago that said, "This is a dumb idea." And I wrote to him and I said, "Boy, that is like a catastrophic understatement. This is a really stupid idea." And let me tell you why. So here are all the things that the government can do to collect on a student loan if you don't want to pay. They can garnish without just on administrative action, no court order, 15% of your wages. They can offset your tax refunds. They can take your lottery winnings. They can offset your up to 15% of your Social Security, retirement, and disability awards. They can collect up to 20% additional fees once you go into default. So if you make a payment of $100, $20 of that goes to paying the collection costs. There's no way to discharge the loan in bankruptcy. They can go and sue defaulters, and if they win, they can take more than 15% of your wages. They can take money out of your bank account. They can put a lien on your property, and they'll report you to the credit bureaus. Otherwise, it's a great idea, Bob. I mean, this is, and so your point about this, they have some nonsense term too about this on ramp for borrowers. You know, as you said, if you can't pay in October, well, pay us when you can. Here's the problem. The interest is going to start to accrue again in October. The interest rate is going to go on. So, all right, good. You want to be a wise guy, and you're going to say, I'm going to show you I'm not going to pay for a year. Well, in a year from now, you're going to owe all of that accrued interest on top of it all. So it's crazy.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to there is a percentage of borrowers who are going to do this.
Yep.
And they're just going to say, I'm just not going to pay. And how horrible the consequences for not doing that. Please don't do that. That is a horrible idea. Why do you have to give another year of non-payments? Basically, what they're doing, and encouraging people go pay your other. In fact, this one article I came across, the writer said, just go pay your higher interest debts and leave your student loans alone. It'll be okay. That's where your money should go to pay back. I mean, rip the Band-Aid off. You got to start it. And man.
Yeah, no, you're right, and your frustration is what I share because the government. So let's go to the other side of the coin, and let's say what
we got about 10 seconds, John.
Okay,
sorry.
So to your listeners, use this new payment program, the SAVE program, because you only have to give 5% of your wages. It's legit. Call your student loan servicer. Get in the best repayment program you can.
Yeah, and I hate to stop right there because you just talked about the solution, I think, right there. Well, John, great to have you on. Maybe I can talk you into coming on 2 times next month and get us all caught up.
Let's do it, Bob. I love talking to you, and we get through a lot of really great stuff. Be well. Good luck.
This is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.